Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, let's get ready to
She had a ball, and she was bulldozing them all by herself. To my future husband, if you're listening to this, I might be saying shit that you weren't expecting.
Hello. I'm Suswana.
And I'm Mehjabeen.
Are you ready to mumble?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, let's just get right into it. When and where did you realize that we were friends?
I thought it was that first meeting in Panorama when you're like, do you need an assistant? Do you need an intern?
Oh man, I was thirsty.
I loved it. I was lapping up that enthusiasm.
Yeah. Well, because the three things that I've always wanted to be since I was a kid is a fashion designer, a journalist, and a dancer. And the journalism dream has now like morphed into being a film producer, but I still do consider myself a journalist because I live by those principles, and of course I have done journalism. But so you were my ticket to working in fashion. I was like, gimme. But then, we also I loved sitting in that cafe and just talking and working and having those sessions together. Both of us have also had the experiences of being friends with people who we thought, relationships that we valued, but then realized that it wasn't reciprocal.
It wasn't serving us.
So I guess I wanted to talk about how we've sort of navigated those toxic relationships and gotten out of them.
As we previously spoke about this, multiple times in that cafe in person as well, many times, how like me having a big heart kind of like, is to my disadvantage sometimes. By nature, I am a giver. And I think a lot of how you navigate friendships and relationships is like, your attachment style as well. I think it takes a lot to realize that like either you've outgrown the person or it's not, your needs in the relationship, in the friendship isn't getting met, and the other person isn't caring about it right now. But the sad part is you having to do that calculation. Is this how it's going to be in the future as well? Because none of us knows the future, and it's really difficult to take a leap of faith for yourself and thinking that, yeah, I'm doing this. Because for me, that came at a moment where like, I was having some major life changes.
Yeah.
I was just getting married. I was just, in the process of moving to another state. I realized like, the friendship wasn't serving me because this is not the kind of people, the kind of person that I would want to raise my kids around if I ever had them. This is not something, I think a lot of who we are, the things that we want to do away with, the intergenerational trauma that we have, there's a lot that we want to just do away with. And then, when we see people in our lives perpetuating that same, things and habits that are, not good for us in the long run, you have to end up making a decision like, this is not where I want to be in the future. I think that's really, really rough, especially like, when you've been friends with them for like 10, 11 years, almost at that point, that's like you've grown up with that person's family. And I think relationship breakups are different, but like the real, breakup, the thing that really hits you is the breaking up with friends.
For sure.
People don't talk about that often.
Yeah. So it's funny because in the last episode I talked about, I hope none of y'all come off of my bridesmaids list, but I certainly have people who used to be on that list and are not anymore. My maid of honor has changed twice. All of the people who don't know me who are listening to this are like, what the fuck is this bitch talking about? Like, is she getting married or is she not? I know that like for sure I was in a friendship where like I just found myself like constantly wondering about the status of our relationship and like being anxious about like, oh, like, are we or are we not friends? Like, you know, do I need to be doing more to like show up for them? Like, and like putting it on myself to like be responsible for the friendship. and and then finally like coming to the realization of like, hold up. This is a two-way street. And this person isn't walking towards me. um, so maybe I should let them go. And honestly, this person actually still is in my life, but me letting go of the desire to make it be what I wanted it to be helped tremendously. and
Yes.
and it's just like, okay, yeah, like, you know, when we see each other, it's cool. Like sometimes, you know, if they reach out, they will, but like I don't really you know, I'm not putting in any additional effort, and I think that that's working for us.
I think, you know, there's this idea that, like, you know, you have to be like sworn enemies, you know, when you stop being friends with someone or being close to someone. For me, that person is no longer in my life, but I really hope, like, you know, they're doing well and they're happy, because it's right after I decided to just walk away. I found the best group of people in my life, people who have kept me alive through the crazy chaos that my life has been in the past 4 years. And I wouldn't be able to do that without the people I have now, that support system that I have built, and something I've never gotten in, you know, our decade, you know, old friendship. And I think there's also a lot of things when adult friendships look very different from being friends, you know, best friends in high school.
Yeah.
You have to understand that we're going to go down different paths. You know, you might have, you know, a career in a more, you know, for lack of a better word, traditional path, where, like, you know, I'm doing something that's looking a little different than what you thought that I would do. It's being able to express yourself and still be accepted. That, I think, you know, as we get older, our older friendships from when we're younger, it's that path that we have to navigate. And a lot of times, you know, I as I was saying, outgrowing, but then also that aspect of toxicity. We can outgrow people, you know, and then still be able to like hype each other up from behind the scenes. But then that's not something that I feel like I was taught growing up. Not that I wasn't taught. That's something I didn't see girls my age being taught. It was always like, it has to be one way or the other. It has to be like this fierce competition. And then growing up, a lot of my friends were brown. They were mostly Bengali. There's also, you know, I feel like, you know, stop me if I'm going in too deep. There's this aspect of like class. There's a lot of classism. There's a lot of elitism, you know, where you come from, where your parents come from. That's something I've had to navigate a lot. And now I see, you know, Netflix shows about that. And I'm just like, oh, okay, this is my life story.
Yeah. No, I mean, the first question when somebody finds out that you're Bengali is, like, you know, what's your hometown?
Oh,
Yeah. And there's definitely for some, like, you know, like an internal calculation that happens. You're this kind of person and
your parents are this kind of people. That's a calculation I didn't learn to do growing up. And, you know, I really hope I don't have to do, because, like, you know, I get that, like, you know, that's something that matters. But here, I think everyone is their own person, regardless of your race, gender. We are all more than that.
I'm only gonna say this because I'm wearing such a like freedom fighter shirt right now. Shout out to Jal for creating this. It's so one of my favorite like lines from Syed Samshul Haq's poem is Shabar upare manush shota tahar upare noy, which for those of you who don't speak or understand Bangla, that means like, you know, above anything else is the human being itself. I had a little bit of a different experience from you because while I was always going to community events events. I didn't actually have Bengali friends. I had a diverse group of friends, but they weren't necessarily Bengali. And I have only recently started feeling, as I've become more involved in hosting events within the community and doing projects with people from within the community. And I've always been conscious of those things being present, but now it's like actually targeted towards me, and I'm like, I'm too old now. Like,
We're too old for this. And then also, like, I feel like I'm about to say something controversial, which is a lot of, South Asian creatives, they talk about inclusivity, on social media platforms, right? But then, the walk that they walk in real lives, it's almost like saying, like, let's say, if your immigrant parent is, they drove a taxi, when they first moved here, it means that you can't be, going on a different route. You can't do certain things in life. That's what's really being said to us when someone says, oh, you're from here, your parents are from here, this is what you are capable of, this is what you're not capable of. Like, one of the things I used to get accused of a lot is that I didn't know how to be diplomatic. I didn't know how to be, like, tactful. And then that was, considered as
which,
like,
being diplomatic in the Bengali community is like high key, like,
it's toxic. It's
yeah,
toxicity.
but like it's expected. Like, you must like keep the peace and like don't call out your aunties and uncles, and
Don't call out your friends.
Yeah, don't call out your friends. Like, and it's like we're never supposed to point out any of the toxic mentality,
Because God forbid you do, then it's like, oh, that's given because we knew you weren't going to understand that.
Yeah. And it's a very, like, you have to take, it's almost like everything has to be done gracefully and
without emotions.
Without emotions. It's like, it's like if you feel a type of way, like, and there's just, you're not allowed to be angry, or at least not show that you are, which is ridiculous.
And then for the longest of times, up until I was like 26, I felt like I belonged nowhere. Everywhere I went, every outing I went, whether social, professional, with friends, I never felt like I belonged anywhere. At work, yes. More so in professional circles, yes. But in my personal life, I never felt like I belonged anywhere. And then I realized it's just that I'm going to have to do away with all of that I hold dear. And in order to be the version that I want for myself, I'm going to have to change a whole lot of things. And that's going to have to start with the people that are closest to me. Because it's just, I think support from friends look very different for every single person, right? We all have different needs, but it's also this, something that I've noticed in like South Asian friendships is that if you are not following the same things, if you're not doing the same things with your life, if your values look slightly different than mine, and I'm talking about what age you get married in, what you do after you graduate, what school you go to, all of that plays such a massive role. And it blew my mind how like that was used to determine whether or not I was worthy of their company. Or whether or not I was worthy of just receiving the respect that I should receive and, should have received. And I lived with this, idea in my head that this is how it was going to be for the longest. And then, like, things slowly started changing. Like, after my 26th birthday, like, I love the people that I have in my life. I love you. I love how different everyone is. And thank God, I think, we both have walked away from things that didn't serve us, because we would never be able to like live this life otherwise.
No. The more difficult things about being a creative and an entrepreneur is like figuring out like how to get our community to understand what it is that I'm doing and to show up for that, right? Because they're not. Or it's also, I mean, I think there's also just a lack of also just resources and education, and obviously we have access to social media, but like our parents, our parents' parents, like, you know, there's generations that are not like familiar with it, and like it's a difficult concept for them to grasp that, like, what is social media fame? Like, what do you mean you're an influencer? And
What do you mean you're a podcast producer?
yeah, part of what I really want to do is actually be able to bridge that gap and, you know, bring our community into the realm of the digital, because while also doing things in the physical, because I think both are important. And because I do think that there's also amazing things that are, you know, amazing community events that happen that the rest of like other communities don't know about, or, you know, folks, you know, diaspora kids who maybe have exited the community don't know that these things are happening, and, you know, trying to bridge that gap of like, you know, between people who have disassociated from the culture and the community because of this toxicity. I want there to be space for them to see the beauty in our culture and feel safe here.
Absolutely. I think, you know, speaking of community, like I grew up dancing, I grew up singing. My, you know, sister also, I think everyone in my family except for my brother, they grew up singing and performing, including my dad as well. But when I first moved here, I realized that so I grew up in Bangladesh. I was born in Bangladesh, and I grew up here. I moved to New York when I was 14. And then back home, something I really received a lot of bullying for. I got terribly bullied when I was in Bangladesh for the fact that I was so close to my culture. National holidays and cultural holidays, you know, I would be dressed up, you know, performing. And I was the unpopular kid. I was the too uncool kid, right? And when I moved here, I kind of faced something similar, but in the sense that like now, back home, your culture was too much too. And even here, your culture is too much as well. To the point I realized I need to, like, you know, especially in college, I desperately tried to hold on to it. But over the years, I kind of distanced myself, even though, you know, I wasn't born here. I grew up there most of my life. But I think in the last couple years, I really started like going to these events, because previously I thought, you know, going to these events, you know, if I posted them, I would be considered uncool, you know. And now I'm starting to see that like there's more to these events aside from just like, oh, you're Bengali. It's also like the part of your culture that you want to relate to. There's a lot to learn about our history, our roots. And, you know, all of this like talks of like, you know, how we're supposed to behave, you know, the toxic things that we don't want to be a part of. It makes us like shy away from these things. But then also like culture does get used as a trope, especially, you know, for creatives. We do it and then it gets done to us as well, where like, you know, back in the days, when I say back in the days, I'm talking about like, you know, 8 years back, you going to like a classical music concert, Indian classical or like Bengali classical, it's like, you know, it's too uncool. And now like, you know, you insert that little piece into your work and all of a sudden, you know, you're doing something cultural. But like, is it because you truly feel like that's a part of your culture that you want to relate to, that's something that you want to be close to? Or is it just, are you just doing it to be like
For the clout.
For the clout? Yes.
Like, do you actually have an understanding of the history behind this?
Or even appreciation.
Yeah.
Or I think that's really important, to be able to appreciate your own craft, right?
Yeah.
I perform a lot now, and then I wanted to do a cover, and this one producer was like, you know, let's just insert a little bit of like tabla in there. And I was like, do you even know what that instrument is? Do you understand that it's not going to fit anywhere in the music cover that I want to do, in the song that I want to do? But like that's what it was, right? It's like the cool thing to do. Culture's like the cool thing now. And you know, but it's not for us. A lot of us, it's a huge struggle. It's a journey. It's a journey accepting parts of you, deciding who we are. It's very much a part of like growing up.
Yeah.
when it comes to not belonging, being accepted, but also being recognized for the work, right? Being able to like explain, like you said, our parents don't have those resources. Just you've seen this a lot coming from me, explaining a lot on my Instagram stories the work I do, and a lot of people like, why do you have to explain so much? Why can't you just post and just do your thing? And I'm like, because a huge part of my work, a huge part of why I started this is also educating people.
Yeah.
How clothes are made, who makes them, right? And I'm not talking about the, sustainably crap that like everyone talks about. I'm talking about like understanding how like the fashion industry works in South Asian countries, understanding that what it goes behind, creating a label, because being a business owner, being a founder of a label is very different than actually being a designer.
Yeah.
Actually, just like, knowing how to do patterns, knowing how to like, how to work on different types of body, knowing how to tell your clients what's going to look good on them besides just colors, knowing what fit is going to, what little changes in the pattern is going to make them feel happier about, how they look in the mirror. It's those little things. It's being able to like, it's not just, and I'm very passionate about this one particular topic where like designers are considered, they're looked at as seamstresses.
Yeah.
Or we just choose what we want, the fabric, and we just give it to our seamstress and they make it for us.
Yeah. No, I mean, similarly, like even with like film, right? It's like it took a very long time for my mother to understand what the fuck I do. and it actually wasn't until I filmed Dawat, my short film, where, because I filmed that in our home and she was there for it, she saw the whole setup and she was like, oh, this is big. She's like, oh, this is
A lot of work.
And she was like, this is actually important work. And she's like, oh, this is what you're doing? Holy shit, that's kind of cool. And so I definitely like saw her like shift after that in terms of like, being like, oh, like you're a film producer. Got it. Okay. I understand now. Yeah, because she wanted me to go into teaching for the longest time, and she kept asking me about like, when are you gonna go get your master's so you can be a professor, etc. And I'm sure that she still wants that, but I've also, I think, successfully eluded that question.
I love seeing her at events, I'm not gonna lie. Like it's so nice to see that, and I love seeing like, this one influencer that I follow on Instagram, like, when she like takes her parents to like, see the murals that she's painted for stores and stuff. I love it. I love when like, parents are supporting creatives do what they love doing, because that support means so much. It's unfortunately something I haven't been able to get from my parents, because being able to see that like, big production, that show, right? It's unfortunately not something that I think my parents will ever come to accept, but that's also something I have learned to accept about them, that that's who they are.
Yeah.
And it is not a reflection of who I am or my work, because it's not their fault that like, they have limited resources, limited understanding of what is it that involves my work being a designer, because my dad very much looks at the fashion industry as like the garments industry. I'm talking like, a huge quantity, volumes of productions for fast fashion companies, that are like, big brands. So he doesn't understand why like, you can make like 10 wedding outfits a year and then make a living out of that. He just doesn't understand that. But that's also like, I've seen him react to this one show that like, I was a part of, but it wasn't related to fashion, but it was just me singing at the Bangladesh consulate, and he's like, oh, you didn't tell me you were gonna be at the consulate, right?
Yeah.
It's that recognition, because it's like, okay, you're at a consulate, you're at the Bangladesh consulate. And that's when I realized it's not as much as that they don't care to understand this, it's that they don't have the resources to understand it.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just frame of reference,
Yes.
right? Like the Bangladesh consulate is something that our parents can understand.
Yes.
In terms of like what that venue is.
Yes.
I just think that sometimes, you know, of course there's boundaries you have to place with your parents, with other people in your life, but there's, I think, also a level of empathy and grace that we have to give them in order to try and understand where they're coming from,
Yes.
so that we can place the proper boundaries and not just be angry at them.
And then I think there is a kind of healing, a level of healing that comes with understanding that,
Yeah.
understanding that it's more about resources. It's not intentional. I think my mother has been, very supportive of me when I was, going to school to be an esthetician. And, I was kind of shocked. I thought she was going to be like, so now you're doing one more thing. What is this going to be like? No, she was very like, oh, this is going to be a business. This is how it's going to be, because she really understood that aspect of, my career. She understands, what an esthetician is. She knows the work that entails. It really like healed me because I needed that. And I think that's really important. But there's also, an acceptance that you have to do. At some point, you have to accept the fact that, like, it's okay. It's not, it doesn't reflect my work or my worth.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Rate, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening. Peace.